If you don't have a person, if you don't have a purpose and going to see whether it's a prospective client or existing client, guess what? Do not see them. I think it's a crime to waste people's time to just want to stop in, check in, see what's going on. I mean, it's a loud, clear message is that I don't have time for this. And 90% of salespeople fall into that trap. And you know what the beauty of this is that we should constantly be finding ways to add value in these conversations.
This is Outside Sales Talk, the best podcast for outside salespeople. I'm your host, Steve Benson, and we're here to chat with the world's top sales experts so that you can get their best sales tactics to level up your game. Welcome back to Outside Sales Talk. Today, I've got Paul Cherry with me, and we're going to talk about questions that sell and gain an edge. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
So, just by way of introduction, Paul Cherry is the founder of Performance Based Results, which provides companies with customized sales workshops, coaching, and sales leadership programs. He's worked with more than 1,200 organizations, including 175 of the Fortune 500. His top rated best selling book, Questions That Sell: The Powerful Process for Discovering What Your Customer Really Wants, is one of Book Authority's 100 best sales books of all time.
Mhm.
Um, well, Paul, it's great to have you here, and we're covering some key stuff here, right? The questions that we ask. First question I had for you, a question about questions. How important are questions in the sales process, and how can a salesperson best use them to their advantage?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the good litmus test of any good sales call is this: who did most of the talking? So if the salesperson did most of the talking, not a good call. If the customer or the prospect did most of the talking, that's a really good call. That's going to be key to helping salespeople use as a litmus test, right? And your next question, what was that again?
Uh,
How can
so how can you use questions to your advantage?
Well, the question is the advantage is they're a guidepost. They're able to engage whether somebody is interested. So if we are going down that spiel and talking about our products, PowerPoints, presentations, or whatever, it's really hard to really decipher if somebody's really involved or not. Yeah, you can look at the body language and their intonation and things like that, but I really want that person to allow me to where they are in that sales process and is a good qualifier to move forward to that next step and or close the sale. Questions will do that.
Makes a ton of sense. Yeah, using questions to qualify where your customer's at in the sales process. Oh, should salespeople expect their customers to ask questions about your products, or should you kind of try to get ahead of those, or should you lead them into what asking questions? How do you think about that?
Well, I think that it's important that it be a conversation. So it's about asking questions, but also soliciting, interest where they can ask questions as well. But I think what there's two elements here is the person who asks the questions, that's the individual in control. Whereas the person answering the questions feels in control. But it's the right question. So really understanding in terms of what people are looking for and what they're looking to accomplish. But if somebody's peppering me and getting into some of the details of the products, yeah, I want to get into that. But I also want to be able to respond. But importantly, though, come back and say, yeah, let's veer back into what's going to be important to you. Number two is, did I answer your question? But let's move on. I don't want to be in the defensive mode where I am just sitting there as if I'm in an interview process. I'm the candidate, and this person is the employer asking me all the questions. No, 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 no. As a matter of fact, when I was in my late 20s, well, mid to late 20s, and I learned the power of asking questions through interviews, and that is, uh, it would start off, the greeting, how are you doing, whatever. But and then I'd say, you obviously met a lot of candidates, and I'm curious based on uh, the things that's going to be important. You tell me the criteria that's going to be really important to you to ensure that you really find the right ideal candidate? And it's interesting that question. This person would start rattling off those ideal attributes. I mean, that was something that really engaged people, found out what was important to them. Number two, I also found in interviews that led to me in terms of selling was, you know, how'd you get started, in this business? Can you tell me a little bit about your history, your background, and challenges and opportunities, and where you see your career moving forward? And why was that important? Because these recruiters were very bored and tired, going through the motions, and it was like showing interest in them and engaging them. So it's a give and take. Anything in life, personal relationships, family relationships, business relationships, sales relationships. To me, it's the whole same process. Selling is
Absolutely, yeah.
selling, engaging. I call it engaging.
Makes sense. And you talk a lot about control in the sales process. Why is it important for a salesperson to control the process as opposed to I feel like there's been a trend in sales in general and buying, I guess I would say, that a trend in buyers that they have a bit more control than they did 20 years ago because salespeople used to control the flows of information, whereas today, um, the information's out there already. There's much more analyst
Yeah,
reports. There's a lot of people creating
yeah, yeah,
content and information and making it
yeah.
available on the internet. And I feel like salespeople have lost a good amount of the control of the conversations they used to have.
Well, I think that's your advantage. Okay, and any salesperson listening today is your advantage. Here's the real news, the good news. Yeah, there's a lot of information out there. We know a lot of it is garbage, is inaccurate. It's as SEO populated, manipulated, exploited, credibility, all that stuff. Here's what the reality is: the customer is so confused and overwhelmed that with all that information, if anything, they either puke, push back, and rather they're looking for that individual, that strategic partner, you, the salesperson, to take them through, guide, lead, and direct them to the right decision. Customers are more cynical and distrusting today. That is your advantage, okay, because of that. My business is booming and there's a ton of information on how to sell. It's booming because a lot of that stuff out there is garbage. So challenge your listeners about that, okay? It's their competitive edge.
Yeah, and I think that loss of control can be a good thing or a bad thing. It can
Yeah,
shorten sales cycles or it can extend them, kind of depending on
yeah,
what the information is. I mean, we
yeah.
had we're a pretty small industry that
Mhm,
mapping and routing for salespeople, but like
mhm,
got a really cool analyst report come out that really broke down the whole area really because there's different types of mapping software, right? There's not
mhm.
just us, but there's building all the territories for your 100 reps across the country. Where do you draw the lines between the zip codes, et cetera? Like other types, trucking softwares for routing, other stuff like that. But someone broke it all down. Some sales consulting firm put it online, and it was really helpful for us because they did a bunch of research that I think, and boiled the ocean, really figured out this whole complex space, made our customers not have to do it anymore. And so that actually shortened sales cycles because they would just read about us and be like, oh, you guys are great at this, this, and this. And that's what I wanted. So
Mhm.
I came to the right place and they know they came to the right place.
Yeah,
So I think it was
yeah,
we actually we put it right on our homepage because
yeah.
it was so helpful for them in making decisions, kind of figuring things out.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas I guess, controversial on the other hand, if the information was bad or,
Yeah.
was like, hey, all the software in this space is
Mm.
horrible, like that would have slowed things down a lot. So I guess a lot of it
Yeah.
is about what's out there.
Well, here's a good example. I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of individuals that would study going into library science. Okay, typically have to get a master's degree in that field, and then you go work for a county, city library. I don't know what the starting salary might be, 40, $50,000 now, and it's just like, here's what's interesting: the number one recruiter for librarians today is not that format. Fortune 500 companies are hiring people with the library science. Why? Because these are individuals be able to take the information, culminate the information, package the information, put it together, and it's be able to educate, influence, these high-level decision makers. Give me the information, the ammunition I need, in a very, tight way that can really help me be able to educate, influence others, and make those decisions that are important moving forward. So where I'm going with that is sales professionals today can be the same way to take all that information out there and tailor it and make it very specific and customized to their customers. That's what I call leveraging the expertise out there. But you know what, Steve? Here's the crazy thing. You'd be shocked how many salespeople don't go through some of just the basic planning steps, when they are making sales calls. And, they're just dropping in, popping in. Hey, I want to talk to you about my product or service. Just you could do such basic homework, 60 seconds. And one of the things when it comes to questions is that, I tell people, before you're gonna stop in on a potential client, Google something about their market, their trend, like 2023 to 2027, specific trend going on in their industry. Okay. And then things pop up, and then you're able to see an article, and you can take the first, second paragraph, get something of interest, and then you pop in. You say, "Hey, it was interesting coming to visit me today. I came across this article, and it talked about the challenges when it comes to this application. Yet others in this industry are saying, no, that's not true." I'm curious as to what your experiences are compared to what are two opposing viewpoints. And I'm like, how long does that take? That shows, a little bit of planning, a little bit of homework, and some credibility is that there's a purpose to the call to get things, sales conversation going versus, hey, what can I show you today? Or what
Yeah,
can I sell
absolutely.
you today?
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, and I think this is a huge advantage for people that always sell to the same type of customers. Like one example, we have customers that sell to dentist offices,
Yeah.
and most dentist offices are pretty similar, right? It's got one to five dentists in it, and they all kind of they do very similar things for all their customers. So they're very similar businesses. It's much harder if are selling water to every different type of business, because if you're selling always dentist offices, you can really know what's going on in their industry, their business. You can have a lot more things that you be an expert in different parts of their business and have it at your fingertips, right? Whereas if you're selling to everybody, it's harder.
Yeah, that is more of that, the feature benefit transactional dump, where if you're going to show up, you better hope that you better close that opportunity because they may not value the relationship, but basically, okay, what can give me the product. If it's 10 cents cheaper, okay, maybe I'll buy it. Mm, I would think a lot of your listeners today are beyond that though, and why they're interested in this. Okay, it's interesting when you talk about the medical industry, and I'll give you an example why this is so important. We went through a major company that was selling electrotherapy to stimulate quick healing of the bones. One of the things that they brought us in because when they would stop in and see surgeons, doctors, and so forth, practitioners, the number one question that came out of the salesperson's mouth was, "Do you have any non-unions?" And non-unions means, any patients that are not healing. Well, when you're asking the surgeon, "You got any non-unions?" It's like, wait, you can't be that good of a doctor, so you obviously have some problems. Tell me what patients. And doctors say, "No, no, no, I don't have any non-unions. All's good, but I'll tell you what, leave me some literature, and if a patient comes up, I'm having a problem, I'll give you a call." And nothing would happen. So one of the things that we did was creating the educational question, and it went something like this: salesperson was trying to get a hold of this doctor. 6 months, nothing would work, nothing at all. So he saw this doctor one morning around 7 a.m. On one of the hospital floors, weaving through from patient room to patient room. So as soon as the doctor is hopping out of the room, the salesperson says, "Hey, doctor, interesting. I saw you because I came across this article in JAMA, and it was talking about some of those patients who are obese and elderly, some of the issues that they're having when it comes to non-unions. However, what the article went further on to say is that really wasn't the toughest population. It was those that were smoking and diabetic. I'm curious as to what your experiences are compared to the different populations with non-unions." Well, the doctor interrupted and said, "Ho, ho, 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 man, I don't have time to talk about this right now. I'm really busy. I got to get to my next patient. But you know what? Are you around um, for lunch? Because I want to sit down. I got a few patients right now. I can think of 5 patients right now. I'm having some real difficulty with within that patient population profile you're talking about. Now, let me ask you, Steve, and those in the medical community, how many times is the doctor going to say, "Hey, do you have time for lunch?"
Only if you have something valuable to say. I mean,
Exactly, exactly.
they don't need anybody to buy them lunch.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like that, but it's rare. You're lucky if you get 2 or 3 minutes with a surgeon.
Yeah,
And yet, does this work all the time? No, but it's showing. It's showing and demonstrating that you're an expert.
right.
You're different in the marketplace, and it's saying, insinuating that I understand your industry, your challenges, your issues. What's going on in the marketplace, and that's
And
what's going to be important for salespeople today.
oh, absolutely. Yeah. And do you use this strategy differently if it's a first impression versus a relationship that exists?
It doesn't matter, and the reality is because things are constantly changing. Here's the point: if you don't have a person, if you don't have a purpose and going to see whether it's a prospective client or existing client, guess what? Do not see them. I think it's a crime to waste people's time to just want to stop in, check in, see what's going on. I mean, it's a loud, clear message is that I don't have time for this. And 90% of salespeople fall into that trap. And you know what the beauty of this is that we should constantly be finding ways to add value in these conversations. Create value is going to be key. I just had this with no, I can't mention the pharmaceutical company, working with the medical science liaisons. Okay, these are people who have off-label discussions. They're not in a selling role,
Right.
and they're doctors, they're PhDs, and they have to make
Hmm.
required calls. And they were like, they brought me in because they're like, well, if I have no new data to talk to my key opinion leaders, I'm not going to go in and see these folks. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You're the eyes and the ears of what's going on in the community. You talk with how many doctors and peers and cohorts on a daily basis? Your job is to really just you can have these informal conversations, and talking with, epidemiologists. What I'm hearing is some of the issues are this, others are telling me this. I'm curious, what are the trends, opportunities you're seeing in the marketplace? We can do this informally. Doesn't have to be, so constructed or disciplined. But let's have a purpose to our calls where we're actually creating and adding value. That's what relationships are all about versus just pitching a product.
I've read stuff from you where you talk about why we should get out of the present situation
Oh,
and
yeah.
focus on the customer's
Oh,
past and the
yeah.
customer's future. Could you talk about
Yeah.
what you mean by that and
Oh,
why it's
yeah.
important?
So, I just, my expertise, my passion, my love is all about questioning. That's just, I don't, it's everything I do because it's all about the relationships. Here's what's interesting. Every industry that I've worked in, and I don't care if it's newer folks or highly seasoned established folks, when we take people through our questions, and I just say, okay, guys, let's get into our groups, merge and purge your questions, come up with your top 10 questions you ask customers, from those, starter calls, initiating calls to those established relationships. Give me the questions as if I'm an outsider coming in, and these are the questions I should be asking on a regular basis. Here's what happens, Steve. 87% of the questions are in the present. In other words, how you doing? What's going on? Um, let's see, how's the weekend? How's business? How's the family? To what are you paying now? What's working? What's not working? What is your budget? What are your needs? What are your problems? What are your issues, challenges, opportunities? Um, what else? What are you paying now? Are you the one that makes the decisions? What else? 87% are in the present, present, present. And then about 8% go into the future. No, it's a goal question. Okay. Timing question. Whether it's, what are your plans this year or when should I get back to you? Interesting enough, about 4% of the questions go into the past. Example is, tell me how you got started. Tell me about some of the challenges that have led up to your current situation. Let's go back to the origins of this problem. Let's go back to what originally led you to make this decision. Salespeople don't go there, Steve. Rarely do they go there. And you know why? Because they think, oh, it's dead. It's done. I can't sell into the past. There's no money into the past. Ah, here's the secret. Everything you want to sell into the future is where? It's in the past. Where's the pain? It's in the past. As a matter of fact, you start peppering a prospective customer, even established customer, with a lot of present questions, you either annoy, intimidate, interrogate, or put your customer to sleep. Salespeople got to back away from a lot of those present questions. It's like a check. Ever have somebody call on you and they go through the checklist of questions? It's a great way to turn off a customer. So the emotions, by the way, are in the future. Because where does a customer prefer to be? It's always in the future. Hopes, dreams, desires, outcomes. So I would challenge salespeople, get out of the present. And they're gonna close a lot more sales, and they're gonna connect with their relationships a lot more quickly.
It makes sense. I mean, to understand someone, you've got to understand where they came from, where this problem came from, how it's developed. And I also think one of the most important things you can do in sales is get someone to envision a future where the
Yeah,
problem that you solve is being solved, hopefully by by your
yeah,
product, but maybe by some other product, but like getting them to actually not just see themselves there, but also put real numbers to how much is this worth in terms of real dollars if we were
that's right.
to solve
Yeah,
this problem?
yeah. It gives me here's an example too. I fall into the trap of asking. Sometimes when I get a low hanging fruit and opportunity, somebody called me a little while back and said, "Hey, Paul, we're interested in bringing you in this date. Are you available?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I am." So I got into the questions. Okay, where's it going to be held? What do you want me to talk about? How long do you want me to talk? How many people? What's your budget? Look about those questions, checklist of the questions, and the person I was getting yes or no answers, and I realized, holy cow, I teach the art of asking great questions. And the person, you could tell by that, you ever get that fourth or fifth question, and you could tell you're actually putting the person to sleep. And I'm like, oh man, Paul, step away. So I said, whoa, 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 let's step back. Let's before I even continue, let me just step back and understand the bigger picture. Here came the question. So tell me where you see you and your business 3 years from now. It was like pulling a lever. All of a sudden, the person is like, opened up the floodgates. They talked about hiring new people, aggressive growth plans, how to outsmart the competition. Um, 4 minutes almost. And then I said, well, how's that? This was post COVID. How's that compared to pre COVID situation? And they said, oh, man, boy, pre-COVID, as a matter of fact, it was a lot different. We were losing a lot of money and opportunities. We got slammed with COVID. We just thought, man, we're just never going to get out of this hole. We just really, really, really have to do something. So my last question was, well, the impact if things don't change, you don't achieve those goals that you just told me about. What might be the impact on your business moving forward? And he said, well, boy, if things don't change, then it really is going to put me individually at risk and my own job security. So what I found out, Steve, is it wasn't about me coming in for an hour or two or whatever, but really understanding the bigger picture. Could I have closed that sale without asking those questions? Yeah, but I would come in for just a keynote for an hour. When the reality is that turned out to be one of my most lucrative account opportunities. By just spending 45 more minutes to have a more deeper, thorough, complete understanding of the customer needs. How did I do it? Getting out of the present, going more into the future and the past. That's an example. We got to take the time to get to know and cultivate our relationships. And it means getting out of the present. Does that help that example?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's a really powerful concept here that you said that is worth thinking about. And that's their people's hopes and their dreams and their ambitions and their fears
Yeah.
all are associated with the future. Like that's all. So if you can get them to start speaking to those things, I think it's a lot easier to get them to actually take action and do something because they attach it to an emotion instead of just oh, I think I'll be able to do 10% better if I do this today. It's
Yeah.
not that's not as not as big of a deal of I think this is how this will affect the business or my career in 3 years, or here's the trajectory that it's my I think that stuff is much more important and gets people to act a lot better.
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad you said that because I think there's one of four questions that prospective customers or existing customers have in their mindset. And your salespeople listening today need to align how their product, service, solution is alignment to address one of these four key motivations. Okay. One of the four are that the questions that a customer has in their mind is number one, how's this going to minimize my risk? The risk of failure, the risk of loss, the real risk of losing money, opportunities, customers, business, um, minimize my risk. Number two is, how's this going to make me look good? How's this going to give me the competitive edge? Okay. Number three. Number three is, how's this going to make me more profitable or successful or help me progress in my career? Or number four is, how's it going to simplify my life? In other words, how's it going to save me time, frustrations, headaches, labor, resources? How's it going to make my life easier? So there's always an emotional driver. And now some of you people might be listening might say, well, I sell a transactional product. Well, maybe you do, but more of a reason that you still need to emotionally connect with your customers. Because when emotions and logic cross, which one rules? Emotions typically do. And your competitors out there, people are listening, they're hawking in there, constantly banging on the doors, trying to claim how they can, you know, save your customers money or give them an opportunity. And if you have, more of an entrenched relationship in there, what better way to protect that relationship from being disrupted to a competitive threat out there? So let's work on those relationships. Questions do that. Okay.
Well, I suspect that a lot of salespeople don't ask as many questions as they
Oh,
otherwise would
yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're concerned with not knowing how to respond or react if they get a curveball response, an unexpected response to a
Yeah.
question. How can salespeople be more comfortable with not knowing the? I think there's actually a piece of wisdom in sales, like don't ask a question that you don't know the answer to. But you can't ask as many questions as you could if you live by that. So how can you get comfortable with asking a question that you don't know the answer to, and how can you effectively deal with those situations of uncertainty?
Well, it is of course within a context, but I think that I think, and again, I would be careful and never put everybody in a box. But there's a real challenge that salespeople, you know, can be hesitant to ask questions. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to be embarrassed. They're afraid of the truth. They're afraid of that maybe the relationship isn't as strong. Um, that they may open up a can of worms. That they're looking at other competitive choices, and I'd rather not hear the truth. Let's just be cordial. Let's be nice. Let's be pleasant. And I'll tell you what, it's hilarious because when I have established seasoned, highly seasoned salespeople who go through my program, and I'm like, man, are you kidding me? They're it's comical because it's like, and they're being honest. It's like, well, I'm not going to ask these questions because I've been calling this guy for 10 or 12, 15 years, and they say, "Oh, they're gonna think I came out of some sales training." I'm like, "Yeah, ha, 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 yeah." But the reality is, because your relationship isn't as deep, as tight as you think it is, okay? And the reality is, your relationship is on the surface. Because if you have such a good relationship, is you should not be afraid to ask those tough questions. Because I'm all about seeking the truth and making the relationships even better. I don't want to be dancing around the issues. What do you got to lose? No, you're not going to lose the opportunity. If you're a lawyer, I get it. You're in court, you ask a question, you don't know the answer. Yeah, it's dangerous. And selling, you're there to investigate. You're like a doctor. Your job is to really dig deep and understand what is it you're telling me, what is it you're not telling me, and what's the hidden message here, motivation. Because you know what, Steve, you touched on something really important that I kick off my sessions with. And this is with Dartnell Research Institute. Here's I ask them, as we kick off the session, I ask, okay, tell me the percent based on Dartnell Research Institute. They did the survey across all industries, and I'll ask you this, Steve: what percentage of the time, on average, are customers telling you what is on their minds? Take a guess as if you're in sales today. What might that percentage be?
Less than 10?
Yeah. Here's what's interesting. I was shocked because I came back with a similar feedback. And what the study, this very exhaustive, intense study found is that 80% of the time, customers are not telling you what is on their minds. And notice I said the word customers. These are people who already know you, are aware of you, and or doing business with you. And the thing that I share with people based on this study is that its customers are withholding what's truly on their minds. The concept you've heard about is masking. Masking. And why is it customers mask? And there's a host of reasons. It's either they don't want confrontation. Number two, they don't want to hurt your feelings. Number three, you're a salesperson. I tell you what's really on my mind. You're going to counter me with objections. I may be shopping around. Number five, I don't want to look stupid or ignorant. Number six, I have other priorities. It's just not important to me. Or because I like you, I don't want to hurt your feelings. And I didn't even give you all the reasons why people mask. But here's my point, Steve. If on average, 80% of the time, customers are not telling you what is on their minds, and salespeople are being skittish and dancing around the issues because they too are masking, because they don't want confrontation, they don't want to jeopardize the relationship. You got two parties that are very much on the surface. And I say, man, that don't fly. Let's make these relationships meaningful, of substance. Let's have customer intimacy. I want to get to the 80%. You're not telling me. Because if I don't go there, guess what? My competition will find a way to get there. And I'm not going to let my competition, because then they have the competitive edge. And it's dangerous. And you know what's something else, Steve? Dartnell Research Institute took the study further and they asked what percentage of the time are customers actively listening? Do you think it's high or low?
Low.
Low. On average, 20% of the time, they're actively listening. And that means when the salesperson is talking, educating, advising, sharing information, that means on average, the customer is only listening to one of every five words. What is the secret? What is the secret to getting 100% listening? It's real easy.
Ask questions?
It's ask questions. That's it. That's
Yeah.
just, and you know what? I'd love to tell you this is Paul Cherry's material. You know where I got this from?
Hmm.
Socrates. Socratic selling,
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that makes sense.
the Socratic method. You know, it's just these things don't. We talk about change. Yeah, a lot of change in the world, but guess what? Some things don't change. And people love to hear themselves talk. Okay, again, and be engaged, be involved. They feel important. They feel valuable. Dale Carnegie, famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's one of the premises. You can
Hmm.
spend 6 months talking about yourself, and finally, maybe that person will start to begin to like you. Whereas if you get them talking about themselves, you make an immediate, meaningful connection in the first 2 minutes. Questions do that, but the right questions.
Well, explain to me lock-on questions.
Mhm.
The concept of the lock-on question. I've heard you talk about that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I love the lock on questions because in my sessions we have the strategic questions. So the strategic questions are, like a time based question. Tell me where you see you and your business 3 years from now. And how's that different from where it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Sort of big picture question, lay of the land. That would be more of a strategic, powerful kind of big picture. Lock-ons are more tactical. Tactical. I'm really trying to listen for the clues. There's a word or words that you say, and to really be able to kind of lock onto that key word to get some substance or meaning behind it. You and I do an exercise, and I'll share with you what I mean. Let's say, Paul, I like everything. This all sounds good. I'll tell you what. I'm going to have to run this by my colleagues. Okay, you give me a stall or an objection, right? What don't I know? I had a
So
30-minute conversation with you and you said, all sounds good. I'm going to run it by my colleagues.
Who are the colleagues? What kind of power do they have? Are they making the decision? Am I making the decision? What do I have to ask them? Do I need, is this permission, or is this are
Beautiful.
finding out if they're even interested?
Absolutely. Great. So what I'm going to do is, I agree. I'm going to ask those very same questions you did, okay, to really assess because I don't want to stall. I don't want to blow off. When I follow up with you eventually and say, "Hey, did you get a chance to talk to your colleagues?" Eventually, when I catch up with you 4 to 5 times, the answer might be either "No, I didn't get a chance," or "Yeah, I did talk to my colleagues. They said no, they're not interested. So we're just going to sit still." I think salespeople can really relate to that. The lock on is fun because what I do is, well, I'm really glad to hear you're going to share this with your colleagues. Tell me though, um, you mentioned you're going to be sitting down with them next Monday. Tell me something. When you're sitting down with them, going over this information, Steve, is this something you're going to recommend or endorse? Now, I'm going to get one of two responses, right? I'm either going to say, I'm going to hear something like an emphatic, yes, I am. Here's the reason why. Or I'm going to get any other type of excuse to be, well, I don't know. I still need to think about it, consider it, look at my other options and see. Now, all of a sudden, I'm getting fluff, right? The lock on allows me to get some substance because I locked onto the word when you said, I'm going to run this by or I'm going to share this with my colleagues. Run or share or talk is a very non-committal verb. So what I just did was I locked onto the verb and I wanted to get expansion, detail on that word to see where you stood on that word. That's all. That's what it is. So the lock on is very much tactical, tactical to qualify and get more detail of your commitment and or lack of commitment. It really goes back to that thing about masking. What I really want to know is if you're sincerely interested or not. Okay. But it's not limited to that, of course. Okay. It certainly is a valuable tool just to build and cultivate relationships with questions. Okay.
And what about expansion questions? How can we turn a ordinary question into an expansion question?
Well, expansion questions, if you salespeople go, if they take a look at their questions, and I'll say, okay, give me your top 10 questions. And as they go, remember I said about the present, past, and future? Well, here's what else is interesting. About 97% of the questions they ask are the who's, the what's, the where's, the when's, the why's, the how's, or the are's. And an expansion question actually replaces the who's, the what's, the where's, the when's, the why's, the how's with a descriptive opener. I mean, I'll give you an example. Describe for me, tell me, share with me, explain to me, expand upon, clarify, um, take me through, help me understand. You got so many choices. So let's take a question. Look at the question. A question is this: the question that salespeople sometimes ask for qualifications purposes. Are you the decision maker? Steve, is that an open ended or closed ended question?
Closed.
Closed. Number two, is it an important question to ask? However, a bit risky to ask. Are you the decision maker? Is it an important question?
It's important, but and it's also risky. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're kind of it's a little demeaning. You worth to talk to? Who should I be talking to? Um, if you're not, and it might encourage somebody not to tell you the truth. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm the decision maker, and you're getting a yes or no answer. Well, here's a great way to salvage what I call um, kind of a poor, kind of weak question, because I still want that information, but I want to ask the question. I want to ask it in the right way. So instead of "Are you the decision maker?" I'm going to get to replace it with a descriptive opener. And here it is. Describe for me. Describe for me your decision making process versus "Are you the decision maker?" Because what am I going to get with "describe for me" or "walk me through your decision making process"? I'm going to get three or four questions embedded in that one question. Who makes the decisions, how the decisions are made, maybe timing of the decision, maybe even criteria, okay? Possibly, would get in that. And research has found is that just by asking descriptive openers, you're going to get on average 30% more information than the traditional who, what, where, when, why, and how. And they're very conversational. When I'm driving to appointments, seeing clients, and if I happen to turn on national public radio and I want to listen to an interview, these individuals who are conducting the interviews are highly trained and asking these types of questions. And it's all about getting the interviewee to talk, 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 talk. So even in podcasts, you'll hear that. People are asking those descriptive openers because they're powerful and they're effective.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
I feel like a lot of salespeople would benefit from journalism school.
yeah, yes, 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 yes. Well,
And you give up a
they're
little,
trained,
you do
professionally
give up
trained to be
a,
inquisitive. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good, good, good point.
and you give up a little control because you're not necessarily going to get the exact specific answers that you need, but you can always ask a second question to go a little deeper. Like
That's right.
if you ask, describe for me the decision making process, they may avoid covering who the exact decision maker, or well, this person needs to approve the budget, whereas this person decides which one of these things are going, which competitor is going to be used, which best fits our needs, and this person gives the go ahead to actually
Mm.
engage with they may not be that specific, but you can follow up and get more specific if you feel like they glossed over some important part of it.
I'm glad you brought that up because it just jogged my memory. We were working with a client in the electrical distribution, one of the top 10 largest distributors in North America. And they were going through our 6-month program. And interesting you say that because here's what happened. It was a government project bid, and they were like, we're not going to go for it because everybody's going to be bidding on this and it wouldn't be worth it. But they said, okay, they were going through our program. They said, okay, let's try that question. Okay. And the question was a two-prong approach. They met with the bid team, and the question came up was, take us through your decision-making process. And what the answer was, again, it's fuzzy because it's like 12 years ago, but the answer was something like this. We'll start with us, purchasing. And then from there, we'll pass it along to construction engineering. From there, then it'll be to the end user. So we found out there was like 4 or 5 parties involved. So there was, with those, since we brought up the key parties, people, next question follow up was to get the next layer, which is, well, tell me what's going to be important to you from a purchasing standpoint. And then what they found out was it's going to be pricing and availability. And then from the construction team, well, what criteria is going to be important to them? And what they found out was going to be about ease of installation and fast turnaround. Number three, engineering. What criteria important to them is always about the durability, the integrity, the warranties, um, just to ensure that there would be no liability concerns. And then the last question, the criteria that would be important to the end user. And that was all about that project would be done, on time or before time because the financial implications, penalties were just going to be outrageous every day that it might be late. Well, it was interesting by that two-layer approach that you just were bringing up to go a little bit deeper. They got a call 6 months later and they got awarded the $5 million bid opportunity. All because they found out the parties involved. And then the second layer was the criteria that was important or what each party valued. And it's the common sense stuff here. But, if you want to, bottom line takeaway is if you want to sell value, you got to understand what customers value. And in a complex sale, when you're dealing with, different parties, just like you said, well, it starts with me, then I take it to my boss, and then my peers, and then on senior level executives, and then our distribution dealer team and end users. I got to know that the organizational or political dynamics.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for prompting my memory on that.
Well, that's what I'm here for. Well,
Yeah.
the
So you ask the
next,
question, you stimulate. That's the same thing we do with customers. You stimulate thought process. Okay.
right, right. Well, so next section, sales in 60 seconds. So quick questions, quick
Yep.
answers. So here's a scenario. Your client has done a sudden and complete U-turn, and now they're
Yeah.
not interested in doing business right now. What questions do you ask them to start reeling them back in?
Yeah, and that's a clear signal that I think a couple things here because that happens so often, and we didn't smoke out the potential objections or concerns. And that's where I go back to the tough questions. You know how we get a little lovey-dovey with our clients and they give us all the promising buying signals. Yeah, okay. I just need to go ahead and just, turn this over and get a signature, get approval so we can get started next week. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, I'll get back to you. When should I get back and pick up? You know what I mean? It all feels good and rosy. And it's like, well, I'm not going to smoke out to find out any potential concerns. Well, that's the very reason I don't want to get comfortable. Where I need to say, okay, that's really good to hear. Well, let me ask you. Let's talk about any concerns. What concerns or issues, hurdles might possibly get in the way in moving this forward? Who might be a party or two that might, who's in favor, who's opposed? What if by chance you do get some pushback? How are you going to respond to this issue? Again, I this is where this happened to me 2 weeks ago, and I teach this stuff. And then we had it all lined up. I was going to be out there in 2 weeks, 3-day gig, and then I found out. I sent the invoice, and he says, "Oh, change your plans." Top leadership said we're going to go in a different direction. Well, shame on me because guess what? Didn't have a full grasp of the decision making process and did not ask those tough questions. All right. Because this happens all the time, all the time.
Absolutely.
So the
Are,
best of objection to overcome is try to smoke out the objection from ever surfacing
for
rather than
sure.
waiting for it.
Yeah. Are there any questions that we should stay away from? Anything that we should avoid?
Not really. Yeah. I've heard this, I think that there are certain questions, but even, like making a customer feel stupid when you ask them why. Why did you do that? Or making them feel like a kid, like they really goofed up or they're stupid. Um, but there's other ways to get around that. And tell me what happened, what prompted you to think that way, or whatever. I think a dangerous question, the only dangerous question I can think of is when you go in blind and you were to ask something like about, who they're currently using, and then asking, and you don't know if there's any issues, pain points, or frustrations, and then asking the questions, well, what do you like about them? And what don't you like about them? I just don't like going there because number one, if it comes out of their mouth, oh, we've been using this current supplier for the last 20 years, been really happy with them. They take care of us in pricing, service, turnaround, responsibility. You don't have a chance now because what comes out of their mouths, they believe. You've solidified the very reasons why they need to sell. So, in that unique situation, that question could work against you. But if you did a little bit of homework and you already knew there's some pain points, they don't have a problem. Okay. But otherwise, I'd say go for it. Ask those questions. The question you don't ask is usually the one that's going to end up getting you into trouble. That's my words of advice to the people listening today.
And is there one go to or an important question that you think salespeople generally don't ask, but they really should be asking and using in sales calls?
I think that, questions are like, to say that there's just one great question out there. That if I was a songwriter, that would be like saying, okay, there's one great note out there that one should always be using on every top song. And the reality is it's weaving certain notes together to make it fluid, to make it dynamic, to make it adaptable. So we're not getting caught up in contrived mechanical ways of questions, but really with the intent to understand, to listen. That's the real key of the question.
And is there a key to differentiating yourself from your competitors or a great way to differentiate yourself through the questions that you ask?
Yeah, and I'd say it's like Voltaire, very famous 16th century French philosopher, said, "Don't judge a person by the answers; judge them by their questions." Claude Levi Strauss, a very famous anthropologist of the 20th century, says the wise person doesn't give the right answers, but poses the right questions. So I think that if you really want to differentiate yourself in the marketplace, because if you look at my bridge process back there, the discovery, That's where the emotions are. When I discover, when I probe, when I listen, when I connect. People want, if anything today, with the trends are going, people, generally speaking, want more of intimate connections, limited connections, but more intimate connections with business professionals. And I would think most of the people listening on today are business professionals. This is your tool. I can truly differentiate yourself when so many other salespeople are just going through the motions so they can get to the solution stage and give their feature benefits pitch, and close the sale. Your due diligence is in your discovery. That is your differentiator.
Makes sense. Well, I'm going to try to summarize
Yep.
all the valuable information you've told us about today here, because a lot of our listeners are in their cars since they're in the field.
Oh,
So, first of all, sales questions should gauge whether and what the first thing you can do with a sales question is gauge whether or not a prospect is interested. So
yes,
you can use it as qualification.
that's true. And
The
that's the very reason why I say ask great questions. It does not mean you're going to get a good answer, but you've
right.
just qualified that if they don't give you a good answer, then you know that they probably don't value or have an interest in a relationship. Sorry to interrupt you on that, Steve, but that was an important element I wanted to add. So please go
Oh,
on, please.
absolutely. Yeah, no, add away. Another thing you talked about was the the salespeople asking the questions are in control, but the person answering questions feels like they're in control, which is an interesting thing to think about.
Because it's sales therapy. You are a therapist, and like a good therapist, you really do want to take the time to really, the worst thing I can do is even say, "Yeah, we're having a problem with our current system." Oh, really? Let me tell you about what we can do in terms of our mapping solutions, all the benefits, features, and how it's going to solve your problems. When I didn't do my diligence, oh, really? You said there were a problem. Tell me more. What exactly is the problem? Cause of the problem? Duration? Oh, how's that affected you and other people involved? And what are the ramifications if you don't fix these issues? See, I have a methodology I'll go through before I jump the gun and want to try to close you or tell my story, because then I may just create a stall or an objection. So that's the reason why when you said control, very important.
Absolutely.
People want to get that stuff out and talk about. It's therapeutic.
Hmm. And another thing you talked about was that you should have a goal in mind to engage with prospects and
Yeah.
guide them towards the right decision.
Yes.
You
Yes.
you should leverage the massive amounts of information out there today and to develop your questions and learn a bit about your prospects and customers and really allow yourself to ask better questions.
Yeah. Less question. Ask less questions. Get a lot more information. And I think it's so important because whether it's a prospective opportunity, somebody's going to give you what? These are outside salespeople. They're going to give you a little bit more time, the prospect, versus a telephone call. But very reason why that first impression, they're going to give you a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes max. And if you're not making a really good impression in that first 3 minutes, and questions are going to do that, that's going to be your leverage. Whether they're going to look at their watch and say, you know what, I got 5 more minutes, shoot, what do you got for me? Okay. Versus when you could have fun with that and say, well, you did give me just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is. Should we continue or reschedule? If you hit what's important to them, it's so great, Steve. They'll go, no, 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 no. Let's go ahead and continue. It's amazing because you got on their emotional wavelength.
Right. And Paul often uses the educational
Yeah.
question where you bring up some valuable information you've researched about your
Yeah.
prospect
Yeah.
and ask a question based on that information that you found.
Yeah, yeah, so easy. It's just third-party information, whether it's a trade journal, article, something on Google, a conversation you have with a colleague, another client. You don't need to mention the client, but it's leveraging third-party resources, which is we were concerned about information. No, no, no. It shows that you are a business advisor, okay, an expert in the field. Yep. Hmm.
Another point that Paul made was don't visit a prospect if you don't have a purpose.
Yes. Yeah.
Most salespeople focus on the present when asking questions,
Yeah.
and they don't ask enough about the
Yeah.
past or the future.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so important to ask questions about the past to understand their pains and
Yes.
also questions about the future to
Mhm.
understand their goals.
Yeah.
You want to emotionally connect with your customers by aligning with their motivators.
Mhm.
So you do this by answering these questions for prospects. How's this going to minimize my risk?
Yep.
How's this going to give me a competitive advantage?
Yep.
How's this going to make me more profitable? And how's this going to make my life easier?
Yeah. 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 Mhm.
Lock on questions are more tactical. You lock on to a verb that they use and ask about the action they'll take.
Mhm.
So, for an example, they may mention they're going to talk to colleagues about your product or
Yeah.
service, and you can say, "Oh, well, when you talk to colleagues, will you be recommending or endorsing our product?"
Yeah. Mhm.
You can also ask expansion questions, which are kind of related. Instead of asking, "Are you the decision maker?" you replace that question with a descriptive opener, like,
Yeah.
"Describe for me your decision making
Yes.
process."
Mhm.
And you can follow this up with more questions like, what would be important for you in order to make a decision here?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's where you get into the lock-ons. Okay, as you get more tactical, digging deeper, deeper. Yes. Very good.
Well, Paul, this has been so valuable to
Yeah.
get a better understanding and a deep dive into questioning your and how to ask questions of your prospects and customers. Where can people that are listening today read more about your work? How do they reach out to you best
Mhm.
for what you do?
And they can go to pbresults.com, as in peanut butter results.com, or performance-based results.com. So it'd be pbresults.com. Uh, Download my 75 best questions to close more sales. Um, that is a powerful reference checklist tool that you can use out in the field before you go into the call, even your little cheat sheet during the call or the post review. Check that out. I think they'll be a valuable resource in helping people get more sales. Okay,
It's one of the most important things we do, and very few
that's
people
right.
dive deep into how this is done.
Get deep. Yep, that's it. All right. Well, thank you, Steve. It was my pleasure. You did a phenomenal job interviewing me and summarizing the key takeaways. I really appreciate that. It was a pleasure.
Well, thanks for coming, Paul. It's been fantastic, and it's been a great episode of the Outside Sales Talk. If anyone think of any of their sales reps that would benefit from learning these skills that Paul has taught us, definitely share this episode with them.
Good.
Take care until next time, everybody.